The Chronicles of Uzaya, a novel by Robert Ray. This audiobook is narrated by Silas Grim, an AI voice built from scratch. No human voice was used in the recording of this audio. Chapter 28. The Horde. The gates of Valros had stood for 3,000 years. Since the Sundering, when the Drow retreated underground and the Storm Kings claimed the surface, the gates had always prevailed. Armies had broken against them, sieges had failed before them, kingdoms had risen and fallen in their shadow, yet the gates remained. Every child grew up hearing it said without ceremony, "While the gates stand, the city's safe." Captain Sarek knew the saying, had sworn his oath standing before those gates, had walked the length of the wall 1,000 times. He stood there now, looking north toward the approach road, and told himself it was as it had always been. The gates would hold. They had to. Sarek looked out over the quagmire. He felt the tremor first, lasting through a full breath. After several heartbeats, another. Along the wall, several men turned north at the same time. For a moment it carried like thunder, the way a peal rolls across open ground. The steady rhythm broke that illusion quickly. "Captain," his sergeant said. His voice was tight. "North approach." Sarek looked. Beyond the quagmire's frontier, half lost in the toxic fog, something advanced. He saw straight lines where none should exist, a vertical mass moving through the haze, its upper edge swallowed by clouds. Like a wall set in motion. At first he took it for a siege tower, some vast engine rolling toward them on wheels. Then one section lifted free of the ground. A deep, concussive boom followed, distant and heavy. It faded completely before the next one arrived, leaving the air slack between them. The fog did not clear all at once. It thinned unevenly as the shape moved forward. A pallid mass rose above the yellow haze, its upper edge swallowed by it. No detail, only scale. As it advanced, the fog peeled away below. Two massive legs came into view, thick and misshapen, lifting and setting down in a slow, steady rhythm. Each step landed with a deep concussion. The ground trembled, even along the wall. Then the body came clear, gray-white, like flesh left too long in water. The surface did not hold still. It shifted, pressed outward. Shapes moved beneath it. Faces forced up from inside, mouths opening soundlessly. Hands pushed against the skin from within, stretching it thin before slipping back. Where a face should have been, there was nothing. No features, no eyes. Only pale flesh, roughly shaped, retaining just enough of a human outline to make the absence unmistakable. Sarek heard his men gasping along the wall, the sound running the length of the battlements. "Horns!" Sarek commanded. He cut 2 fingers toward the signal master. The response was immediate. After a brief scramble, the horner planted his feet and lifted the long bronze instrument from its cradle. The metal was thick cast and darkened unevenly, its surface bearing old casting seams, repairs hammered flat, and a web of hairline cracks where stress had settled and stayed. It had been kept ready, but never tested. He drew a deep breath. The war horn sounded above the battlements. It carried through fog and stone without rising or falling. Other horns took it up along the wall, the same warning reinforced, until it filled the city streets and alleys. Just inside the gates, confusion took hold. People stopped where they stood. Others ran without knowing where. Most had never heard the warning before, but none of them mistook it. Along the wall, the archers went still. Bows lowered, hands slipped from strings, eyes fixed on the shape in the fog, and on what gathered beneath it. No one spoke for a long moment. "We can't fight that," someone said. Sarek wanted to argue, wanted to say the twins would stop it, but the words never came. Part 1. The Valric Twins. They stood on either side of the gates, as much a part of the city as the foundations it was built on. Two immense stone constructs, so familiar they barely registered to those who passed beneath them. They were part of the city's shape, as enduring as its walls. Generations had been born, aged, and buried beneath their shadow, without ever seeing them move. They were spoken of the way one spoke of mountains, enduring, unquestioned. One held a sword, the other stood with fists clenched. Guardians of the gates, the last gift of the old empire. Today, they moved again. The vibration rattled the ground, a low grinding deep in the stone. Joints fused for decades, slowly turning. The crack of rock breaking free from centuries of stillness. Within the stone skin, something woke. Gears turned, locks released. Sculpted joints scraped as weight-bearing segments shifted. The left twin turned his head. It did not move quickly. The joint resisted. Centuries of stillness calcified into its seams. Fused grit and settled debris cracked apart, grain by grain, as the weight shifted. A low grinding filled the air, abrasive and disproportionate to the slight turn of the head. Flakes of weathered stone broke free and fell. Larger fragments followed, crumbling from the neck where mineral had fused plate to plate, falling in a steady spill of dust and rock. It continued. The sound did not ease. People had named him Blade, for the sword that defined him. Light bloomed in his eye sockets. Deep blue. Not on the surface, but from within, as if something long sealed had finally found its gaze. The right twin followed. Clutch, named for the weapon he lacked. Within his eye sockets, the same blue light burned. As they woke, birds burst from nests built high along their shoulders, scattering into the sky. Then Blade's hand tightened on the sword hilt, 30 feet of carved stone half buried in the earth. The ground resisted, then cracked around it. The sword rose, dirt and rubble spilling from around the blade and crashing down at its feet, dust billowing outward. Clutch flexed his hands. Stone fingers spread, then drew together again with a sound like breaking masonry. The twins were advancing. Each step drove force into the ground. The impacts carried through the wall itself. Watching the twins move, Sarek felt a surge of confidence he hadn't expected. They had stood outside these gates longer than any living memory. Longer than the city itself, if the stories were true. They were built to answer threats like this. The thought came easily. The twins would stop it. He turned to a sergeant. "Get the archers ready. When the crawlers close, we strike. Together." The order moved down the wall. The twins had placed themselves between the gates and the open ground beyond. Past them, the Horde continued to emerge. Part 2. The Wall. Along the 100-foot battlements, 273 archers took their places. Most were city guards, men accustomed to routine patrols and quiet shifts on the wall. The militia stood among them as well, those who practiced with bow and blade when they could, never truly expecting to use them in earnest. A smaller number were veterans, men who knew what waited beyond the gate, and answered anyway. Hands checked bowstrings twice. Quivers were shifted. then shifted again. No one spoke. Sergeant Gavrin walked the line, younger than most on the wall, but no one mistook him for Green. He'd drilled the company hard over the past week, crash training in volleys and coordinated fire. He knew who had steady hands and who would run when the creatures got close. The professional soldiers he didn't worry about. They'd seen combat. It was the shopkeepers and carpenters, standing shoulder to shoulder with his guardsmen, that concerned him. "Knock!" His voice carried across the wall. The archers reached for their quivers together, drew arrows, knocked them to strings. More details from the Horde were visible now through the yellow mist. Hundreds of shapes moving at different speeds, some fast, some slow. The difference was, now they were coming. "We wait for Captain Sarek's signal," Gavrin shouted. "Volleys, coordinated. We don't waste arrows." He looked down at the approach road. The smaller things were spilling ahead of the Titan now, crawling out of the fog in a dense, low press. Insects, centipede forms, skittering shapes that hugged the ground and flowed around stones and debris, filling every gap as they moved. Larger creatures pushed through them. Shambling dead waded forward, legs half lost in the crawling mass. Serpentine forms slid over it without slowing. Winged things dipped low, touching down only long enough to vanish back into the mist. The ground itself seemed to be moving. It was more than he'd expected, more than the walls had ever faced. "Hold!" he called. The archers held, strings drawn, arms trembling from the tension. Gavrin watched, waiting for Sarek's signal. Part 3. The Plaza. Behind the gates, the inner plaza was packed with soldiers. 300 men, maybe more, guardsmen and volunteers alike. All faced the closed side portcullises flanking the main gate. Captain Sarek descended from the wall and crossed to where his horse waited. He mounted, not for ceremony, but so he could be seen. The plaza went quiet. "Men of Eldenport," he called. His voice carried, steady and practiced. "You know what comes. You can hear it. You can smell it." He let that sit. "The gates of Valros have never fallen. Not to siege, not to sorcery, not to any army that has marched against them." He turned in the saddle and pointed north toward the gate. "The Valric twins defend this city. They have stood longer than any of us have lived. They were made for what approaches now." Some of the men straightened. Not fearless, steadier. "If the gates fall, you hold the plaza. You hold until the twins break the Horde. When they do, we drive what's left into the quagmire and end it there." He raised his sword once. "For Eldenport." He said it with grim conviction. "For Eldenport," the answer came back. Uneven at first, then again stronger. Sarek pulled the reins, bringing his horse around, and rode back toward the wall. The Horde was 300 yards from the gates. Part 4. The Titan. The Titan advanced on the gates of Valros. It rose higher than the walls. Its pale flesh moved subtly as it walked, the surface never quite still. Shapes pressed outward from within, swelling briefly before sinking away again. It moved on 2 massive legs, each step unhurried. The ground answered each impact, stone carrying the force outward through the city's bones. Where a face should have been, the flesh remained smooth. The twins stepped forward to meet it. Blade raised its sword. Morning light slid across the old granite edge. Clutch set its stance, feet planted, shoulders squared toward the Horde. Far ahead of the twins, a crawling layer of horror rolled over the terrain. Insectile bodies squirmed and clustered, pouring into sinkholes and shallow breaks, vanishing briefly before boiling up on the far side. Within that monstrous carpet, the dead moved. Shambling forms waded forward, legs half buried in seething insects, bodies lurching with each step. They did not hurry. They did not stop. When the horde met the line, blade responded. Stone met rot with a force that shattered bodies. The fabled sword swept low, pulverizing the masses, crushing them all into the ground. For a moment, the advance buckled inward. The dead pressed forward into Blade's reach. The granite blades swept through them in devastating arcs, bodies bursting apart as it passed through them. Hundreds fell over long minutes, the approach road becoming a graveyard of crushed corpses and crawling things. For a moment, it seemed the Guardians would hold. The crawlers did not pass. They surged around Blade's feet, climbing over fallen bodies and stone alike. Insectile forms swarmed up its legs in rippling sheets, clinging to joints, spilling into seams, flowing wherever gaps allowed. They did not strike. They did not bite. They covered. Blade's sword struck the ground, the massive edge smashing through the writhing mass at its feet. Crawlers burst apart. The swarm recoiled, then closed again. The dead shambled past it, continuing toward the wall. Clutch met the flyers. They dove at the construct's head in shrieking flocks. Its arms swept through them in a single arc. Granite met bone. They died as they fell. The Titan collided with Blade. Stone and pallid flesh met with a tremendous, deadened impact. The force carried through the ground and into the wall. Blade held, pushed back a step, its feet gouging trenches into the approach. The Titan's bulk wrapped around its sword arm, pinning the granite blade in place. Clutch charged, lowered its shoulder, and drove into the flank. The impact barely registered. The Titan yielded a handspan, no more, then held, an immovable presence that swallowed the force effortlessly. The ancient construct struggled, hammering its fists into the resistance closing around it. Each blow sank in. Each accomplished nothing. Blade tore free, raised its sword, and struck. The massive edge cut deep into the creature's bulk. Black ichor poured out, thick and viscous. The wound gaped, then closed, healing, reforming, flesh knitting back together almost as fast as stone tore through it. On the wall, Sarek's hands tightened on the parapet. "It's healing," he whispered. Around the twins' feet, the horde pressed forward. Crawlers swarming, shambling dead pushing through. Blade swung again, then again. Each wound reformed almost as soon as it was opened. Beside it, Clutch struggled. Pallid flesh had flowed up to its waist, engulfing and holding, refusing to let go. Yet it fought on, hammering its fists into the Titan's bulk, but slower now. Then Clutch did something unexpected. From deep inside came a new sound, liquid shifting under pressure. As the flesh of the Titan drew closer, Clutch's jaw split open, stone plates parting along hidden seams. A function sealed for centuries finally answered. The oil spilling out burned with an intense chemical heat, the air shimmering above it. Flames erupted across the battlefield, yellow-white. The Titan's flesh charred and blackened, its skin cracked and peeled away. Shapes, trapped within, stretched against the flaming membrane as if in agony. A burning slab of flesh dislodged, falling to the ground in a heap of ashen slag. The oil flowed while the horde burned. Crawlers folded into smoke. Larger things blistered, split, and came apart. The shambling dead staggered, blackened, and dropped where they stood. On the wall, men shielded their faces from the heat. When the flames died, the approach was a wasteland. Charred husks littered the ground. The shambling dead lay in blackened heaps, scattered and finally still. What remained of the horde, dozens now instead of hundreds, staggered forward through the smoke, disorganized and broken. But the Titan did not burn like the others. The flames scorched its surface, blackening the outer layer. Beneath it, new folds of flesh pushed up, fresh, drained of color. Its mass swelled and flowed, closing over Clutch's last free arm. Pale white flesh pressed inward, not to crush, but to engulf, forcing its way into the twins' open maw, flooding the cavity, seeping into joints and seams. Clutch struggled within it, ancient mechanisms straining against their limits. The Titan did not hurry. It yielded where it needed to, then flowed again, patient and unyielding. Inevitable. Its bulk surged. Stone disappeared beneath it, shoulders first, then chest, then head, all drawn inward. Swallowed. The blue light in Clutch's eyes flickered once, then went dark. When the Titan straightened, it was larger. Blade fought alone. From deeper in the quagmire, the crawlers kept coming. They flooded over the construct, clogging its hinges, burying metal beneath a moving carpet of bodies. Blade slowed. Each swing took longer as the weight accumulated. Motion bled away. The construct stood buried under layers of crawling things. Part 5. The last day. The Titan reached the gates of Valros. Runes of warding flared along the stone, blue, then white, blinding in their intensity. The Titan leaned in. Crack! The runes went dark. Granite split along the seams around the gates as iron shrieked and hinges twisted free. The wall around them gave way. Sections of battlement sheared off and dropped into the inner plaza, carrying stone, weapons, and men with them. Defenders were flung from the parapets or crushed where they stood, buried where the wall came down. When the dust settled, the gates hung askew, half attached and half fallen. The wall had been driven inward, stone and battlement strewn everywhere. The city lay open beyond the wreckage. Across Eldenport, people stopped where they stood and turned north. In the harbor, ships being loaded for flight fell still. Sailors looked at one another, understanding passed without words. The gates of Valros had fallen. Part 6. Dead in 13 minutes. Minute 1. The paving stones were split and buckled. Chips of mortar and powdered stone sifted down from the collapsed wall. Where the gates had stood, stone and iron lay. Dust choked the air, bodies crushed beneath fallen blocks. Some screamed as they were dragged clear, others trampled underfoot by men who did not look back. Death is meant to be an ending. When it isn't, something fractures in those who watch it fail. When the wall gave way, the dead staggered over the rubble. The survivors struggled to form a line. Dust hung low over the fractured paving. "Hold the line," Sarek commanded, voice low. The front ranks locked shields. The dead hit them. No coordination, no tactics, just overwhelming mass. Bodies slammed against wood and steel. Rotting hands grabbed at spears. Teeth snapped at exposed flesh. They never slowed. Men in the front rank shoved back, boots sliding on loose rubble. Someone went down and didn't get back up, dragged under by the press of bodies. A horse reared, screaming, iron-shod hooves lashing out. Bodies closed in, dragging it down. Blades hacked and stabbed at arm's length. Steel bit, stuck, tore free. Nothing changed. The dead pushed on, heedless of wounds that would have stopped any living thing. The line buckled. Men tripped over the fallen, over debris, over each other. Shouts turned to screams. Orders dissolved into noise. Someone broke. Then another. The front scattered. Minute 2. The crawlers followed. Not in force, in spillover. Chitinous bodies forcing through gaps left by the collapse, dragging low across stone and rubble. Too many legs. They came over the fractured paving, long bodies scorched black. Burned segments split and smoked as they moved. One collapsed halfway through the square, twitching once before going still. Others kept coming. Shouts rippled through the plaza. Men wilted. Those who stumbled did not rise again. Minute 5. The gas rolled in through the shattered gates. Yellow-green and heavy, it clung low to the ground. What had lingered on the walls was now seeping beyond them. It moved over the fallen first, pooling in armor seams and open mouths. The burned crawlers smoked faintly as it reached them, their charred plates darkening further beneath the haze. Men staggered as it filled the space, seeping into breath and cloth alike. Coughing turned to choking. Some fell where they stood. Others took a few steps more before convulsing and going still. Orders died in throats that could no longer draw air. Lines thinned as men broke and stumbled through drifting poison, colliding with rubble, with each other, with the dead. The haze drifted across stone and steel, blurring edges as it passed. Minute 9. The ground shuddered under a titanic step. Men turned as the shape emerged from the haze. It came fully into view. Pale flesh rippled across its bulk, faces pressing and slipping beneath the surface. What remained of Clutch was gone within it. No one raised a weapon. Those who could ran. Those who couldn't simply stared. There was nothing to be done. Captain Sarek stood amid the dead he'd cut down. His sword arm was bleeding, his shield gone. The Titan turned, regarding him with eyeless awareness. Sarek raised his sword. The Titan surged forward. Minute 13. The soldiers ran. The wounded were left where they fell. The Horde found them. Blade still stood on the approach road, motionless, beneath thousands of squirming things, crawling into the joints, the gaps, and the spaces between. The Titan towered over the inner plaza. The streets were layered with the dead. Gas drifted through roofless buildings and along the harbor roads, dissolving into the cold air. The last of the shambling dead wandered the perimeter, moving without direction. Silence settled over Eldenport like ash. Part 7. The Pale Horror. Lisanne had made a mistake. She lived 3 blocks from the gates. Should have run, should have grabbed her children and fled. But she'd thought the gates would hold. Then they broke. She pulled Dren and Lissa into the cellar and closed the door, held them in darkness, hand over mouths, whispering, "Don't make a sound." They heard the city tearing itself apart above them, stone grinding, wood splitting, a distant rolling thunder that never quite stopped. Silence followed. She waited, counted to 100, turning the numbers into song. Maybe they were safe. The world dropped away. The cellar floor split without warning. Stone sheared loose. The house came apart around them as the foundation gave way. They fell together. Lisanne clutched the children. Light flashed through the collapsing roof as they tumbled down. In that brief, weightless moment, she saw it. Not above them. Waiting below. A pale, humanoid shape crouched at the bottom of the pit, heavy and still. Muscles bunched beneath its skin. Eyes studded its shoulders and crowded the mass of its head, too many to count, all turned upward, watching them fall. Then came darkness. Harbor Master Rowan Pike stood on the eastern dock. He'd heard the gates break. That terrible sound. Now he saw sails. Ash gray, long and taut, drawn tight over hulls built for speed, not numbers. He grabbed his spyglass. Coal-skinned figures in silver armor lined the decks. Drow. Prows inlaid with bone and silver, human skulls built into the rails and side frames. They were sailing straight toward the eastern wharf, in from Tenbrick's gate. "Sound the alarm," he shouted. "Naval assault, eastern approach." Rowan looked back at the city. Smoke climbed from the northern districts, darkening the sky above the walls. This wasn't just the gates. The eastern docks had no defenses. Warehouses. 20 guards with crossbows. Nothing built to stop warships. The first would reach the wharf in 10 minutes, and no one was coming to stop it. Chapter 29. The Rising. Part 1. The Dampening Cell. The cell was black stone, glossy and seamless, cold enough to ache against bare skin. Faint iridescence surfaced when light caught it, an oil-slick shimmer. The walls curved inward overhead. No corners, no angles. The surface was threaded with geometric channels sunk into the stone, inlaid with metals he could not identify, worked with the same precision as the lattice scales. And the ziggurat beneath the drowned quarter. Veilguard-era resonant stone, shaped by techniques the Crucible could use, but never replicate. A suppression design, not meant to imprison mages, but to dampen magic and restrain the spiral's corrupting aura. The Crucible had not built this cell, but they understood it well enough to use it. The dampening effect hit him immediately, a heavy weight like a lead jacket. The connection thinned. The power that should have answered did not. But the resonant stone recognized what he carried. The harmonic key, pendant and blood. Ancient frequency threaded through both. The lock on the door, unlike the cell, was old iron, corroded but solid. No visible weakness in the mechanism. The door itself was oak, banded with iron, hinges on the outside, frame set cleanly into stone. He had checked it once, then again. Nothing loose, nothing compromised. The guard had said dawn. 3 hours. Perhaps less. Uzaya reached inward, where his power should gather, that familiar sensation of eldritch force knotting at his core. Nothing answered. He extended his awareness toward the guards beyond the door. His thoughts failed to carry. He sat back down and closed his eyes. He had become accustomed to the steady vibration emanating through the ground. It was easy to ignore if he didn't think about it. At some point, that changed. War horns sounded from the northern walls. Deep, sustained blasts, the city's call to arms. Distant, but unmistakable. He placed his palm flat against the floor. A tremor moved through the stone into his hand, up his arm, settling behind his ribs. Steady. It swelled beneath him, eased, then swelled again. Then something answered above. A massive crack split the northern distance, a concussive fracture that drove through stone and buried chambers alike, shaking dust from mortar seams and sending a low shudder through the vault. The war had reached the city. Uzaya heard muffled voices beyond the cell door, a sharp exchange between two men, rising fast. Another voice cut in. Running footsteps, then silence. He leaned back against the wall. The vibration carried through his body, stronger than before. Part 2. The Fisherman. The fisherman's name was Sebastian. He'd worked these waters for 30 years, knew every current and channel, every shift in tide and wind. He'd set his nets before midnight like always, let his boat drift while he dozed against the mast, waiting for dawn to haul his catch. He woke to the sound of rushing water. Not waves, not the tide. Water draining, gurgling. Sebastian stood, gripping the rail. His boat was tilting, the water level dropping fast. In the low light before dawn, he could see other boats nearby, listing sideways as the water rushed away beneath them. What in the... A grinding sound began, deep, from below the surface. It reverberated around the basin, rattling the hull beneath his feet. Then he saw it. The water folded inward not far from the boat, between him and the coast. A whirlpool opened, the surface spiraling down into a violent vortex, pulling everything toward its center. His boat drifted toward it, slow at first, then faster. Sebastian grabbed the oars, rowed hard. Useless. The current was too strong, too focused. The boat spun sideways, caught along the far rim of the whirl. The grinding grew louder, carrying up through the water and into the hull, a vibration that did not break, only intensified. Sebastian held on as the boat tilted, water sloshing over the sides. Other boats were already near the center. One by one, they vanished into the churning water, the screams cut off as they went under. Then, through the churning water at the center, Sebastian caught a glimpse of something dark pushing upward. It broke the surface like a blade driven up from below. It kept rising. The water surged outward, then collapsed back in, the drainage accelerating. Black mirror glass rose to first light, reflecting nothing. The obelisk shuddered once as it reached its full height, then settled. Sebastian's boat spun along the outer rim of the whirlpool. As he fought for balance, the rotation briefly carried his view north toward the hillside. Dust erupted in thick clouds there. Buildings slid and collapsed as the slope heaved, something colossal rising beneath it. He had no time to understand it. The boat careened sideways and tipped. For one brief moment, he hung there, staring up at the obelisk looming over the emptying cove. Then he was falling. Earth and water closed over him. The obelisk stood rooted among capsized boats on the exposed basin floor. Above it, a ziggurat had risen from the hillside, its black stone surface covered in silt and rubble. When dawn reached the drowned quarter, the water had not returned. The city woke to a different shape. Part 3. The Escape. Hours passed. Uzaya sat on the floor with his back against the wall, eyes closed, breathing slow and measured. His body was still, his awareness turned inward. The tremor came without warning. A crack ran through the stone beneath him. The floor dipped under his weight, then held. Uzaya pushed himself up as the cell shifted. Thin stress lines crawled along the curved walls, then split open. Rubble and dust shook loose from the ceiling, choking the air. Shouting echoed from somewhere above him. Panic was spreading. The stone groaned. He tried the door again. The frame had loosened. Another tremor twisted the hinges. Uzaya watched as a gap opened at the seam. He gripped the edge and pulled. It gave. He forced it wider and slipped through. The passage was empty. Uzaya had only seen these corridors once, when they dragged him down here the day before. Most of the cells here were unused, save one where a body lay crushed beneath fallen stone, part of the ceiling still sagging where it had given way. He kept moving, always choosing up. The passage was strewn with debris where the ceiling had collapsed. Fresh cracks ran through the walls, stone pulling apart under strain. Uzaya climbed over fallen masonry and ruptured flooring, deliberate in each step. He was nearing the surface when the final tremor struck. The floor buckled. He braced against the wall as stone tore open beneath him, a jagged seam ripping down the corridor toward the exit. The vault groaned under its own weight. Walls leaned inward. Dust fell in sheets. Uzaya cleared the widening split and ran. Behind him, the passage failed. Sections of floor dropped into darkness as something immense forced its way upward through the crucible itself. He dove through the last open doorway as the corridor collapsed and struck the landing hard. The great hall convulsed. The ceiling split from corner to corner. Daylight flared through widening gaps. Heat rose from the depths below. Uzaya forced himself upright and ran. The stone slanted beneath him, buckling toward the surface as fractures raced through the structure. A final crack chased him through the doorway. He burst into the hall. The ceiling was gone. Open air yawned above. Uzaya stole a glance over his shoulder. The crucible was sinking. Black mirror stone rose through the wreckage. Part 4. The Emergence. High above Eldenport, a raven traced a slow circle. From that height, the rupture beneath the crucible appeared as a clean incision, half a mile long. It split the district end to end. Streets fractured. Buildings on either side pitched outward as the ground beneath them heaved. The Black Pyramid rose through the crucible, faster than felt possible. The earth around it tore open, venting heat and molten stone through widening seams. Thousands of tons of black mirror stone punched upward through its floor, obliterating the chamber where the elders had condemned Uzaya to the cells below. The central hall was erased. The western wing sheared away as the pyramid's flank drove through its foundation. Massive blocks tumbled into the opening fissure. The eastern half fell to destruction, supports dragged sideways, stone tearing free. As it continued to rise, heat vented violently around its base. When it finally crested, molten stone poured from the breach, where friction and pressure had liquefied the bedrock around it. Lava spread outward from the rupture, following streets and filling alleys. A widening pool formed around the emerging structure. Buildings blocks away ignited from radiant heat alone. Glass softened and ran in its frames. Iron warped. Wood burst into flame before the flow reached it. The pyramid's ascent slowed, then ceased. It settled into the molten basin it had created, sending heavy surges through the lava as it settled in the liquid stone. The pyramid pierced the heart of the district. The crucible vault was not destroyed. It was displaced. Carved faces that once looked out from the crucible's walls lay shattered at its base. Age-old spires stood broken and half buried in cooling stone. Masterwork masonry had been sheared apart, wedged beneath the pyramid's foundation. Higher still, near the apex, a vast symbol had been carved into the stone, an inverted eye etched deep into the gleaming surface, lines descending from it like roots, large enough to be seen for miles. The mark of the Ancient One. Across the city, as Uzaya escaped, the ground split in 5 places at once. In the market district, Senna, a net mender, was running for the docks with her children when the cobblestone street they were on split and cracked apart. She stopped short, hauling her children back with her. Something rose from the opening. Blackstone. It did not assemble or unfold. It simply emerged, pushing upwards through the earth, uninterrupted. A single surface, perfectly flat, climbing higher and higher, without seam or joint. Senna didn't wait to see its end. She fled with her children. When she looked back, it towered behind her, a rectangular monument, absolute against the copper sky. In the iron market, another rose. In Temple Hills, a third. 5 across the city, taking their places. Part 5. The Amber Dome. When the pyramid breached, the atmosphere changed. The morning sun climbed toward noon, but its brightness died as Uzaya watched. From its summit spread an amber field, a vast curved dome spreading out across the sky. As it expanded, sunlight dimmed in steady measure. Day turned to dusk beneath it. Color drained from the world, leaving stone and earth washed in a muted copper gray, and with it, the cold. Beneath the field, warmth drained away. It stretched out over the ziggurat, now dominating the drowned quarter. Another pulse, another anchor. The dome expanded for miles, even reaching the obelisks that had risen beyond the city. Where amber met black stone, geometric symbols along the obelisk's surfaces shone with blue light. Connecting and reassembling a network last used when Tharn Eskar was at its height, unified under the reign of the Ancient One. Finally, it was done. The city lay sealed beneath an amber dome. The sky remained visible, but not the same. The sun hung overhead, present, but stripped of its power. A low, almost imperceptible vibration spread across Eldenport. The shadow field was in place. Part 6. The Calling. Uzaya headed north, toward the gates of Valros. The direct roads were gone. Lava filled the lower streets between him and Merchant's Rise, moving slow and certain, following the grade. So he cut east through the outer hollows, keeping to higher ground. The Arcanum rose ahead, its black towers intact against the copper sky. The doors stood open. He slowed. The forecourt lay empty. No movement inside, no light in the windows, no chant, no ward flare, no sign of a stand. The warped stone around the sheared tower still held its faint glow. Everything else lay dark. Uzaya watched a moment longer, then continued on his way north. Beneath the shadow field, the city was coming apart. People ran without direction. Smoke rolled through the streets from burning stone and timber, thickening the air until it burned the lungs. Bodies lay broken among the rubble. Survivors fled past him without seeing him. He kept clear of the lava as it flowed through the fractured streets, creeping slow and deliberate, catching anything it touched on fire. Heat rippled the air above it, warping stone and iron alike. The pendant burned as well, but not with heat, with cold. The pyramid's subsonic hum throbbed through the ground and air. The pendant rejected it outright. Wrong, twisted, corrupted. Uzaya felt it in his blood, in his bones, a certain kinship with the pyramid itself. It was Veilguard in origin, he was sure of it. But the power driving it was not. The spiral, corrupt. Still, he felt its pull. Not from the corruption, but from the stone itself, calling from somewhere beneath the frequencies it was never meant to carry. Uzaya continued north through a city on fire, his mind restless, thoughts scattered. He slowed, then stopped. Uzaya turned around and looked back the way he had come. The black pyramid dominated the skyline. At its apex, the symbol of the eternal eye watched the city. His vision clarified, focus returned. He began walking toward it. Before too long, he was back at the edge of the district where the pyramid now stood. The streets had been scoured by the heat. Some ran black with cooling lava, others choked where the flow had hardened. Buildings had burned to ash or collapsed outward. Others stood like islands, encased in stone where the molten rock had cooled around them. Drow detachments moved through the streets, overlapping sweeps in disciplined formation. Uzaya avoided them and kept moving. Even as every instinct urged him to stay hidden, the pendant pulled him forward. The black pyramid rose just ahead. 400 feet of smooth mirror stone, seamless and unbroken. His gaze traced upward. The massive carved eye crowned the apex, hewn directly into the black stone, contained within an inverted triangle cut deep into its face. Lines descended from it like roots. 50 feet down from the apex, the pyramid's walls had retracted into themselves. The black exterior had slid downward into the pyramid beneath it, revealing a horizontal band of open air. Within it, a narrow platform extended from the face, open on all sides. Below that opening, asymmetric towers of uneven height clustered together, breaking the pyramid's seamless face. Steep roofs cut into the skyline. Spires of carved black rose along the surface, their stone duller and more worked than the mirror-smooth exterior. Narrow ports opened between them, angled outward toward the city. Tall windows glowed with muted amber light. Near the pyramid's base, the streets gave way to hardened lava. Dark, uneven flows lay frozen in place, cracked and buckled where they had cooled. What little cover remained ended there. From his vantage point, Uzaya could see wide arches gaping along the foundation, framing passages into the pyramid's interior. Drow forces flowed through the vast apertures in controlled intervals, ranks forming just inside the shadowed ports, while armored sentries held position along the foundation. Uzaya slipped behind the buckled corner of a collapsed tenement, where the outer wall had fallen inward and the upper floors had pancaked into the street. He crouched in the shadow of the wreckage and went still. Heat shimmered in the air. Stone cracked as it cooled. A detachment of drow advanced from one of the archways at the base. Warriors in formation, black and silver armor, a robed magister among them. Behind them drifted a figure in dark robes, floating a handspan above the stone. His eyes were closed, his face slack with concentration. One of the wizardly kind, those who dealt in the impossible. They were headed in his direction. Uzaya held his breath. The pendant pulled harder, insistent, but he did not move. The wizard slowed. One hand lifted, fingers spreading slightly, not reaching so much as listening. Uzaya felt something brush against him, a probing presence, passing through stone and shadow alike. But it did not pass through him. The wizard's eyes snapped open. They fixed on Uzaya's position. The wizard made a brief, precise gesture. The warriors surged forward. At the same instant, the air around Uzaya shuddered. A low frequency enveloped him where he hid. His breath caught. His limbs refused him. Unable to move, unable to speak, not even able to fall. Stasis took him. The warriors closed in around his frozen form. The wizard drifted closer. His attention settled on Uzaya, a probing awareness reaching through the stasis field. Uzaya felt it once more, something intruding. Instinct answered. Uzaya sent his thoughts in like fashion, flaring outward through the stasis field, presence meeting presence. The pressure pushed back. "Who are you?" Uzaya thought. The message carried cleanly, without sound. The wizard halted mid-drift. His attention sharpened, no longer distant. Recognition passed between them in that silent space. "Thex," came the reply, calm and precise. "Magister of the harmonic arts." The pressure withdrew. Thex's gaze fixed on the pendant at Uzaya's chest. His eyes widened, just enough. He raised a hand toward it. "He bears the pendant of the eye." Then, in Drow, the words carrying weight. "Velkureth, Veilguard." The warriors shifted, glanced at each other. This wasn't just a trespasser. This was something else. Another stepped forward, clearly captivated by Uzaya's appearance. His pale skin, his white hair and sharp ears, the similar bone structure of his face. "What is this?" His voice carried disgust. "Drow blood, but defective." Thex cocked his head. Surface raised, sun corrupted, yet carrying a Veilguard relic. His gaze lingered. Not hostile, not concerned, not curious. Measuring. He drifted in a slow circle, examining Uzaya from every angle. "Emperor Nethris will want to see this." Thex made an odd gesture. The stasis reconfigured instantly. Uzaya felt himself rise off the ground, floating. The warriors surrounded him, taking his arms and guiding his weightless body toward the pyramid. "Take him to the Ascendant Court," Thex said, still not touching the ground. "The Emperor will decide what to do with it." Even in stasis, Uzaya felt the fleshy eye pulse from within the pendant. Cold,